ladies and gentlemen, fellow citizens. Today is an important day in our political history as we, the mighty minority in Parliament, is here to present the true state of the nation following the President's presentation of the false state of the nation address to Parliament last Thursday, 27 February 2025. It is our hope that this will help entrench our democracy as we provide factual information on the state of our nation to the Ghanaian people, who are better placed to judge over the handling of the affairs of our country. One would have appreciated a true state of the nation that acknowledged challenges in 2022, the remarkable turnaround as a result of the decisive policies of the MPP government, supported by the IMF, and the challenges still remaining that will require steadfastness from the new government. And when this is backed by a clarion call by the President to Ghanaians to support him and his new government to consolidate the gains, you would have had consensus across the political divide to drive the Building Back Better agenda for Ghana. But what did we get from the President? Rather, he chose to do propaganda, and we can assure you that this propaganda will come to hit and hurt him hard. President Mahama accused the previous government of ending the year with a headline inflation of 23.8%, above the IMF target of 18%. This divergence, the President indicated, showed a poor performance of monetary policy. Isn't this the typical story of the glass being either half empty or half full? If one looks at the fact that the COVID and Russia-Ukraine war crisis-driven inflation rose to 54% at the end of 2022 and dropped sharply to 23% at the end of 2023, that's within 12 months, then a headline inflation of 23% should be seen as a significant positive performance. Of course, not at the medium-term target yet, but the disinflation process is on track. It is also instructive to note that the IMF has an upper band of 22% for inflation for December 2024. This suggests a rather marginal deviation compared to the program target, contrary to what President Mahama wants us to believe. If such a marginal deviation from the disinflation path is bad, then the President is the worst culprit, when his last government deviated from an inflation target of 10.1% by achieving 15.4% at the end of December 2016. For those who are familiar with Ghana's program with the IMF, these minor deviations from the program targets are sometimes normal because we are dealing with a very uncertain economic environment. And deviations like this can always be explained when one analyzes the data. Per the rules of the program, we will need to enter into consultations with the fund as provided by the consultation clause, so that both the government and the fund can assess what went wrong and see the way forward. President Mahama has shot himself in the foot by his rush to paint this situation as bad, and soon we will see how he recovers from it. What the President also failed to do was to inform the people of Ghana that there are other significant measures of the performance of the economy that informs the state of the nation other than inflation alone. Real GDP growth, trade balance, current account balance, and international reserves. The performance of the financial sector, among others. These are the important components of our economy. That is the real sector, the external sector, and the financial sector. The average growth in real GDP for the first 3 quarters of 2024 was 6.4% and expected to end the year at a rate above the IMF target of 4%. This trend outperformed all projections and revised projections by both the IMF and the World Bank. If this is bad by President Mohammed's standard, see the president's previous record. In 2016, the economy grew by 3.4%. It was 4% the year before. And so if you call 6.4% bad, how about 3.4%, ladies and gentlemen? He underperformed by all standards, whilst President Akufo-Addo overperformed. The trade balance also shows a significant economic improvement, maintaining a surplus trend since 2017, ending 2024 with a surplus of 5.9% of GDP. If this is bad economy, let's consider President Mohammed's record of a deficit of 2% of GDP. Surplus 5.9% of GDP at the end of 2024, compared with a deficit 2% of GDP at the end of 2016. The current account balance also ended 2024 with a surplus of 4.2% of GDP, the very few times in recent history to have a surplus current account. And such a surplus tells us of the strength of the external payments positions of the country. Throughout the history of when President Mahama was in office, and without any confluence of crisis as faced by the previous MPP government, the current account was consistently in deficit, and he ended 2016 with a deficit of 3.1% of GDP. So again, let's compare 4.2% surplus by the end of 2024 against 3.1% deficit by the end of 2016. Gross international reserves measure the resilience of the economy, particularly in times of crisis, and how prepared the country is to weather external shocks and vulnerabilities. The Bank of Ghana has, through novel innovations, accumulated high levels of reserves, the largest in our history, with $8.9 billion. This is 4 months of import cover, above the IMF's 3 months of import cover. The NDC left office in 2016 with gross international reserves of $6.2 billion, or 3.5 months of import cover. Again, 4 months of import cover versus 3.5 months of import cover. Who is better managing the economy of Ghana? Ladies and gentlemen, the true state of our nation is that economic growth has rebounded strongly. The external sector is impressive, and our resilience towards shocks and external vulnerabilities is at all-time high. This is the true state of our economy, but the president and his government has a different understanding of what a strong economy means. President Mahama again cited the headline inflation of 23.8% and the 19% rate of depreciation of the cedi for 2024 as indicators of a badly managed economy. It's important to provide context to this. Following the COVID-19 and supply shocks globally, prices of food and other essentials increased substantially. Even in the advanced countries, inflation averaged 7%, very high for countries that are used to 1% or less inflation. The causes of this rise in inflation globally were not far-fetched. For example, COVID-19 slowed down the world economy due to lockdowns and the closure of factories and offices, including major port facilities across the world. And this adversely impacted global supply chains. Also, many countries implemented fiscal stimulus to revive economic activity. However, faced with supply constraints, the increased demand resulting from the fiscal stimulus led to higher inflation. To control inflation, the central banks of many countries, led by the advanced economies, resorted to monetary tightening by increasing rates. This led to significant investment reversals from small open economies like Ghana, weakening our currency and fueling the rise in inflation. This, together with imported inflation, pushed Ghana's inflation sharply to 54% by the end of 2022. The current rate of 23% therefore means that inflation was halved within a year, and we were working to bring it further down to the pre-COVID level of 8 plus or minus 2% by 2026. Whilst 23% is still high, the effort to bring it down from 54% has been significant. It must be noted that before COVID-19 struck the world, the MPP demonstrated a record in inflation management. We brought inflation down from 15.4% in 2016, handed over to us by President Mahama, to 11.8% in 2017, 9.4% in 2018, 7.9% in 2019. Inflation for 2 successive years remained a single digit, the largest period in our recent economic history. The effect of the pandemic began to be felt from 2020, when inflation rose to 10.4% in 2020, 12.6% in 2021, and then to 54% at the peak of the global economic crisis in 2022. Even laymen can understand this. How the current managers of the economy cannot understand this can only be born out of political dishonesty. The adverse circumstances the MPP administration faced were unprecedented, but such did not exist when President Mohammed's government achieved headline inflation of 15.4% above the target of 10.1% in 2016. We know that there is an inverse relationship between inflation and the strength of a currency. A higher depreciation of the currency will automatically pass through to inflation in developing economies like Ghana. This means that inflation will also be higher, and the reverse also holds. Therefore, following the sharp depreciation of the cedi in 2022 by 50%, inflation was also going to rise sharply. This strong pass-through would naturally be a major challenge for the managers of the economy. By reducing the rate of depreciation to 19% in 2024, we have seen the muting of the pass-through to inflation, and these efforts cannot be glossed over. These efforts by the previous administration and the favorable results produced should be appreciated by President Mahama and improved for even better outcomes for our people. These effective efforts should not be disregarded and belittled for political reasons. As a country, we gain nothing by this kind of politics. Ladies and gentlemen, it is important to note that the rate of 6.5% depreciation we have witnessed year to date in 2025 is not informed by any sustainable strategies by the current government. The current disparity between inflation and the rate of depreciation is evidence of heavy central bank intervention on the market. The Mahama administration and the central bank can do this, but this is happening only because the previous administration left a gross international reserve of $8.9 billion by the end of 2024. This is being used to shore up the value of the cedi. The president deliberately, as you know, avoided this in his statement. Fellow Ghanaians, the true state of the nation is that exchange rate stability, which we saw before the end of 2024 and which has continued into the first quarter of this year, is not by any magic from the Mahama government. It is because the Akufo-Addo government left significant levels of international reserves for them. In addressing the issue of buffers created to support expenditure and maturing debt obligations, the president focused on the sinking fund as if it is the only source of buffers. The sinking fund is just one of our buffers. At each point in time, the government designates some accounts for buffer and for purposes of special payments. In the last 8 years, Such accounts included the sinking fund, the Eurobond proceeds account, the IMF proceeds account, and the Treasury Main 2 account. For example, the IMF third review disbursement of $360 million was done on 2nd December 2024, but this was kept as buffer, part of which was used to pay coupons amounting to $346 million to Eurobond holders on 3rd January 2025. This was not done from the sinking fund. Similarly, in October 2024, we paid $520 million to our Eurobond holders for the first coupons and other fees. But again, this was not done from the sinking fund. How could we have done these payments if we didn't have buffers? Yet the president thinks that the only buffers we have is the sinking fund. The NPP also left significant amount of buffers, more than 5 billion Ghana cedis from the 2024 revenue collected by GRA in the Treasury Main 2 accounts, which the new government has used. Yet the president failed to talk about it and focus only on the sinking fund. Financial sector, ladies and gentlemen, the president again played to the gallery by stating that, and I quote, "The financial sector continues to struggle despite the previous government reportedly spending 29.9 billion Ghana cedis on the financial sector cleanup exercise to date," unquote. Typical of NDC's usual sweeping statements, he made this conclusion without providing any basis. Whilst we sympathize with those who were adversely affected by the financial sector cleanup, the exercise was well intended to protect the banking industry from collapse, protect depositors' money, and revive the economy. The evidence today shows that, notwithstanding the DDEP effects on the local banks, the financial sector has become stronger, with banks posting impressive financial ratios and returning to profitability. This is the true state of the financial sector in Ghana. The Bank of Ghana's recent publication, Summary of Economic and Financial Data, January 2025, provides very rich information about the performance of the financial sector. The annual growth in total assets of the financial sector as at the end of 2024 was 33.8%, and total deposits by 28.8%. Similarly, in terms of liquidity, core liquid assets to short-term liabilities grew by 46.3%. The capital market shows similar strong performance, with the GSE All-Share Index year-to-date growing by 56.2% by December 2024. The earnings and profitability ratios also show that return on asset before tax recorded an annual growth of 5.4% in December 2023 and 5% in December 2024, whilst return on equity after tax grew at 34.2% in December 2023 and 30.8% in December 2024. It is no secret that the strength of an economy is also determined by the strength of its financial sector. Given the record of performance of our financial sector under the NPP administration, is this correct, ladies and gentlemen, for such an economy to be described as badly managed? Ladies and gentlemen, you can now understand that all the main components of our economy are in good shape. The real sector, as demonstrated in real GDP growth, the external sector, showing impressive external positions through trade and current account surpluses, and the performance of the financial sector, posting impressive financial ratios. Therefore, we need to ask President Mahama, how did he come by the conclusion that the economy was mismanaged? Ladies and gentlemen, the president tried to scare the Ghanaian people about the country's debt service obligations for the next 4 years, which according to him will amount to 280 billion Ghana cedis, comprising 150 billion Ghana cedis for domestic and 130 billion Ghana cedis in external debt servicing. Government at every time provides for debt servicing obligations, and the president is aware of this. We expect the president to mobilize the funds and stop complaining such as what every government in Ghana has done to service our debts. The MPP did that when he left us with debts in 2017. Our debt management strategy has ensured that Ghana's debt levels have decreased substantially, and so are our debt service, taking a significant burden off the government. We have ensured that through strong negotiations, the servicing of Ghana's debts owed to our official bilateral creditors, $5.4 billion, has been rescheduled until after 2026. The NDC government didn't negotiate this. The agreement we reached with the Official Creditors Committee for Ghana entails a rescheduling of all debt service, principal and interest, falling due between 20th December 2023 to 31st December 2026. As a result, no debt service under bilateral debt will be paid until after 2026. I want to repeat that. No debt service under bilateral debt will be paid until after 2026, including the debt we didn't pay in 2023, since we declared the debt standstill. This was negotiated by the MPP government, that we will not pay our debts to our official creditors until after 2026.